through those as quick as we can and then open up questions. Really, some of the, the basic topologies that we've already talked about are chain, hub and spoke, mesh, and offline. And the variations on those are different directions of replication. The number of source servers, the number of target servers, your domain, single domain versus multiple domain, and network quality. And then all combinations of the above. So really, you're only limited to what you can imagine in your design or how you can set replicator up. So some of them that we've, identified over the years are things, in the chain topology. You can have one-way, two-way cross-domain, a serial replication, single server, three server, overflow networks. And, in hub and spoke environments, you can have a syndication, aggregation, then again, a two-way bridged, cross-domain, federated, and in mesh, sparse mesh, all kinds of different topologies. And here's a couple from the chain. And these are just representations of how this actually works. So I think you get a copy of this. You'll be able to have access to a copy of this presentation, so I don't need to go into too much detail on all of these different topologies. You can see all of the different topologies that are available. Okay. I'm just going to get through these real quick. So for example, here's a good one, a 3-server dev, staging, and production. So you can have in your web front-end server dev, QA, and then production. I've seen some clients go from development to QA, then they release that content to production. So they have replication set up between all three of those. And once the content is ready for production, they let it out into production. All right. Okay, this is a representation of a syndication hub. Basically, a syndication hub would be if you have one farm that's basically the master and you want to push that out to all the other farms. That's what we call a syndication. And then there's aggregation, which is basically the other way around. If all of those three should be pushing data into a centralized location, you can set replicator up to do that. And let me grab 3Ds here. Some of these slides are hard to get through. This is what we call a bridged hub, where you have several hubs in your configuration. For example, this main UK server in this case is a hub for these three. Then each of these is actually a hub for 2 other servers. Let me get through. Sparse mesh we talked about. In direct mode, you can do kind of a mesh, but you can never have a replication loop in direct. So there has to be a stop. There has to be an end point to the replication, or it'll keep on replicating forever. Okay, adaptive mode we've also talked about. The adaptive mode allows you to do a full mesh, so everybody can talk to everybody else. And then, of course, we talked about offline, where these servers don't even have a connection between the two. And to use the offline mode, there's some command line utility. There's some command line commands that you have to use to actually take advantage of that, to export them from one site and then import them into the other side. Okay. And of course, we also work through load balancing. That's part of almost every organization. So of course, we work using load balance. And here is a depiction of having multiple replication engines on your service. As I was mentioning in previous topics, we can also have those services running on multiple servers in your farm to take advantage of, more threading, more package processing, which will help with keeping everything in sync. I'm going to scroll by these. Come on. All right, the application scenario. Okay, so some of the scenarios that we've, come across over the years are, rich content replication, and that's the geo-replication that everybody seems to be interested in. That's where you can have, a full fidelity copy of the same data anywhere in the world based on how you have replication set up. You can do distribution. We talked about syndication and aggregation. You can do disaster recovery. So you could have, what we call an active-active, where all of your servers in the farm, or all of your farms are basically a failover because everything's being replicated. So you have, an active farm at different parts of the world at all times. Okay. Web content management, you can do internet content promotion, how we talked about being able to replicate, from your publishing environment, for example, to your production environment when you're done. We talked a little bit about intranet, extranet content promotion, and we saw how you could use some of those maps to, control just content that I want to go over, maybe not necessarily look and feel. And then another thing that people sometimes have used Replicator for is reorganization. So whenever I was showing you those custom bindings in which you could do to actually take data from one site to another site or a different point in the hierarchy, you can use to, restructure and reorganize content at the same time. All right. And then we have version upgrades. We can do content migration, from, so let's say from 2010 to 2013, you can actually use Replicator to push content from 2010 up to 2013. Okay, unreliable network, of course, another popular usage, ship-to-shore, battlefield usage over satellites, being able to replicate customization, and then offline, of course. Okay. That's really it. Now we're going to open up to questions. Just made it, I think. Oh, we're about 5 minutes over. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now, and otherwise we will wrap up.